The letter arrived on a day when the sky wore its heaviest gray, as if it mourned alongside her. Esperanza Rivera sat at her kitchen table, staring at the envelope with trembling hands, the address scrawled in her grandmother's unmistakable handwriting. Though how it could be, she did not dare to consider. It was only after several minutes of hesitation that she broke the seal, revealing the crisp paper within its message, both simple and devastating. Your abuela has passed. Come home. Home! The word echoed in her mind like a distant bell tolling for the dead. She had fled that place years ago, vowing never to return, yet now Fatih or perhaps guilt pulled her back toward the sprawling mansion nestled deep within the jungle. A house so vast it seemed alive, its walls whispering secrets only those attuned to their frequencies could hear. And though Esperanza tried to convince herself otherwise, she knew the pull was stronger than mere obligation. Something deeper stirred within her, an ancient ache buried beneath layers of denial. Her flight landed late in the evening, just as twilight draped the world in shades of violet and indigo. As the taxi wound its way through narrow roads flanked by towering trees, Esperanza felt the air grow heavier, thick with humidity and memories. The jungle itself seemed to breathe around her, exhaling secrets long forgotten. When they finally reached the gates of the estate, she stepped out into the night, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird desperate to escape. The mansion loomed before her, its silhouette jagged against the darkening sky, windows glinting faintly like watchful eyes. For a moment she hesitated, gripping the strap of her bag tightly before forcing herself forward. Each step across the overgrown garden felt deliberate, as though the earth itself resisted her presence. Flowers bloomed suddenly along her path, their petals unfurling in colors too vibrant to be naturala crimson so deep it almost bled, a gold so bright it hurt to look upon. Yet no one else seemed to notice. Even the driver who dropped her off merely nodded politely before driving away, leaving her alone with the strange beauty of the place. Inside, the house was cooler than she remembered, its stone floors slick beneath her sandals. Shadows danced erratically across the walls, casting shapes that defied logic. A chair shifting position without explanation, a portrait tilting slightly as though someone stood behind it. Her aunt emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her face lined with sorrow but also curiosity. "You've come," she said simply, her voice carrying the weight of unspoken questions. Esperanza nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Over dinner, which consisted of dishes her grandmother had once prepared, her family spoke softly of the woman they had lost, each memory weaving another thread into the tapestry of grief. But there were silences too, gaps where words refused to form, hinting at truths left unsaid. Later, alone in her room, Esperanza lay awake, listening to the house breathe, its creaks and groans familiar yet alien, like an old friend speaking in tongues. It began that first night, the whispers. At first, she thought them products of exhaustion or grief-induced hallucination, soft murmurs carried on the wind through cracks in the shutters. But soon they grew louder, more insistent, until she could no longer ignore them. Rising from bed, she followed the sound to the farthest corner of the house, a corridor she hadn't ventured down since childhood. There, at the end, stood a door sealed shut with rusted iron bars, its surface covered in carvings she couldn't decipher. Pressing her palm against it, she felt warmth radiating through the cold metal, a pulse like a heartbeat. "Who are you?" she whispered, though she wasn't sure whether she addressed the house or herself. No answer came, but the whispers continued, urging her closer, pulling her into the mystery of a legacy she had spent her life denying. And so, under the moonlit gaze of the jungle, Esperanza Rivera stood poised between worlds, her scarred hand resting on the threshold of what would become her destiny. The following morning brought with it a clarity that had eluded Esperanza during the restless night. The sun pierced through the dense canopy, casting dappled patterns on the stone floors of the mansion, as if nature herself conspired to illuminate the hidden corners of the house. Her aunt appeared in the doorway, her face softened by fatigue but animated by an urgency she couldn't conceal. "There are things you need to know," she began, her voice low and measured, as though speaking too loudly might awaken some slumbering force within the walls. They sat together in the library, a room filled with books whose spines bore titles written in languages long forgotten. Dust motes floated lazily in the shafts of light streaming through the windows, each particle suspended like a memory waiting to be stirred. Her aunt spoke of their family's history, a lineage steeped in traditions both revered and feared. "Your grandmother was the last of the healers," she said, her fingers tracing the edge of a worn leather-bound journal. "She communicated with spirits, not just any spirits, but those bound to this land, to our bloodline." Esperanza listened, her skepticism warring with the unease that coiled in her chest. She wanted to dismiss the words as superstition, tales spun to entertain children during long summer nights. Yet the weight of the stories pressed upon her, their truth etched into the very fabric of the house. Her ancestors, it seemed, were mediators between worlds, tasked with maintaining harmony where chaos threatened to erupt. But such power came at a price, one paid in solitude and sacrifice. As the hours passed, Esperanza wandered the halls, her steps guided not by conscious thought, but by an invisible hand pulling her toward the forbidden room. Along the way, she encountered small signs that confirmed what her rational mind refused to accept. A vase placed neatly on a table despite no one having touched it. Faint voices murmuring from behind closed doors. Shadows moving independently of their sources. Each anomaly chipped away at her resistance, carving out space for belief. Her uncle joined them later, his presence adding another layer to the unfolding narrative. He spoke of the artifacts hidden within the house, relics imbued with powers beyond comprehension. Among these treasures lay journals chronicling the encounters of her forebears with otherworldly beings, accounts so vivid they read like poetry rather than prose. One entry described a spirit who appeared as a woman cloaked in mist, her form shifting like water caught in sunlight. Another recounted a ritual performed beneath a full moon, its purpose unclear but its consequences devastating. By evening, Esperanza felt the boundaries between reality and imagination blur, the line separating the tangible from the ethereal dissolving under the weight of evidence. She retreated to her room, seeking solace in the familiar comforts of solitude. There, surrounded by the scent of aged wood and faded wallpaper, she allowed herself to consider the implications of what she'd learned. If her family truly possessed the ability to communicate with spirits, then perhaps she did as well. The thought terrified her, yet it also sparked something deeper, a curiosity born of longing, a desire to understand the mysteries woven into her DNA. That night, dreams visited her unbidden. In them, she walked through a forest bathed in perpetual twilight, its trees whispering secrets only she could hear. At the heart of the woods stood a figure cloaked in mist, her form shimmering like heat rising from asphalt. "You carry the mark," the figure said, her voice resonating like a melody played on strings pulled taut. Esperanza reached up instinctively, touching the crescent-shaped scar on her hand, now glowing faintly in the dreamlight. When she awoke, the sensation lingered, a tingling warmth that spread through her fingertips and into her soul. The next day dawned bright and clear, the air crisp with promise. Esperanza ventured outside, drawn to the garden where flowers bloomed in impossible hues. Their petals seemed to pulse with life, their colors shifting subtly with every breath of wind. Kneeling among them, she noticed how they responded to her touch, leaning toward her hand as though seeking comfort or guidance. It was then that she realized the truth. Whether she wished it or not, the legacy of her family had claimed her, binding her to a destiny she could neither escape nor deny. Returning inside, she found her aunt waiting, a look of quiet expectation on her face. "It's time," her aunt said simply, holding out the key to the forbidden room. Esperanza took it, feeling its cool metal against her palm, the weight of generations resting in her grasp. Together, they made their way down the corridor, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone floor. As they approached the door, the whispers grew louder, weaving together into a symphony of voices calling her name. With trembling hands, Esperanza inserted the key into the lock, turning it slowly. The mechanism groaned in protest, rusted from years of disuse, but eventually yielded. Pushing the door open, she stepped across the threshold, her heart pounding in anticipation. Inside, the air smelled of earth and rain, heavy with the scent of ancient magic. Shelves lined the walls, their surfaces cluttered with objects that defied categorization, crystals pulsing with inner light, scrolls inscribed with symbols that danced before her eyes, and jars containing substances whose origins remained a mystery. Her gaze fell upon a pedestal at the center of the room, atop which rested a book bound in leather darkened with age. Its pages crackled softly as she opened it, revealing text written in a language she didn't recognize yet somehow understood. The words spoke directly to her, their meaning unfolding like petals opening to greet the dawn. They told of a chosen daughter destined to restore balance between worlds, to mend the fractures caused by greed and fear. Esperanza closed the book, her mind reeling from the revelations. Outside, the jungle hummed with life, its rhythms harmonizing with the beating of her heart. For the first time, she felt the pull of her heritage not as a burden but as a gift, a connection to something greater than herself. And though uncertainty still lingered, she knew one thing with certainty. She would answer the call, embracing the role fate had prepared for her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Esperanza stood in the heart of the forbidden room, her hand resting gently on the book. The whispers continued, softer now, like lullabies sung by the wind. Somewhere deep within the house, a clock chimed midnight, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the story of her family and of herself. The dreams came first, vivid and unrelenting, pulling Esperanza into a world that felt more real than the waking one. She found herself standing in a vast chamber bathed in moonlight, its walls adorned with murals depicting scenes of celestial battles and earthly harmony. At the center stood the cloaked figure from her earlier visions, her form shimmering like water touched by sunlight. "You have walked this path before," the spirit said, her voice resonating like a hymn sung in an empty cathedral. Esperanza reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing against the misty fabric of the cloak, only to find it solid beneath her touch. The sensation sent a shiver through her, as though she had crossed some invisible boundary between worlds. The spirit introduced herself as Marisol, a guardian bound to the house for centuries, tasked with preserving the knowledge of Esperanza's ancestors. Her gaze bore into Esperanza's soul, searching for something unnamed yet vital. "Your family has always been a bridge," Marisol explained, her words flowing like liquid silver, "between what is seen and what is hidden." Each syllable carried weight, echoing in the cavernous space of the dream. Esperanza listened intently, her mind grappling with the enormity of what she was being told. If her lineage held such power, why had she never noticed it before? Why had she spent years denying the very essence of who she was? When she awoke, the memory of the dream lingered, sharp and clear, as if it had happened moments ago. Outside, The jungle hummed with life, its sounds blending seamlessly with the whispers that now seemed constant within the house. As she moved through the corridors, objects shifted positions without explanation, a vase appearing on a table where none had been, a book opening itself to a marked page. These occurrences no longer startled her. Instead, they fueled her curiosity, urging her to delve deeper into the mysteries surrounding her. Her aunt noticed the change in her demeanor, the way her eyes sparkled with newfound purpose. "It's begun," her aunt murmured, a mixture of pride and concern etched into her features. Together, they explored the attic, uncovering relics long forgotten. Mirrors whose surfaces rippled like water, bowls filled with sand that glowed faintly under moonlight, and masks carved from wood so ancient it seemed alive. Each artifact whispered secrets, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of information. Esperanza reached for a mirror, her reflection distorted by waves of light that danced across its surface. Within those distortions, she glimpsed fleeting images: her grandmother tending to the sick, her great-grandmother mediating disputes between rival spirits, and herself standing amidst a crowd of people whose faces blurred into obscurity. That evening, as darkness settled over the estate, Esperanza experienced her first vision during waking hours. It began subtly, a flicker at the edge of her vision, then grew into a fully formed scene unfolding before her. She saw a village surrounded by fields of golden grain, its inhabitants celebrating a harvest festival under a sky streaked with colors too vibrant to be natural. Among them stood a woman dressed in white, her hands raised toward the heavens as if invoking blessings. Esperanza recognized the woman immediately. It was her grandmother, younger and radiant, her presence commanding yet gentle. The vision faded as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving Esperanza breathless and disoriented. Over the following days, similar visions plagued her, each one revealing fragments of her family's history. She saw battles fought not with swords but with words, negotiations conducted in languages no longer spoken, and rituals performed beneath skies painted with constellations unknown to modern astronomy. Through these glimpses, she pieced together a narrative of sacrifice and resilience, of women who embraced their gifts despite the dangers they posed. Yet with every revelation came questions. Why had the legacy been kept secret? What forces sought to disrupt the balance her ancestors had maintained? One night, unable to sleep, Esperanza wandered into the garden, drawn by the scent of flowers blooming unnaturally early. Beneath the pale glow of the moon, the petals shimmered like jewels, their colors shifting with each passing moment. As she knelt among them, their fragrances wrapping around her like a comforting embrace, a soft voice called her name. Turning, she saw Marisol standing nearby, her form illuminated by the lunar light. "The time draws near," the spirit said, her tone both urgent and serene. "You must decide whether to accept your role or turn away." Esperanza hesitated, her heart torn between fear and determination. Acceptance meant embracing the unknown, confronting dangers she could scarcely imagine. Rejection, however, would sever her connection to her heritage, leaving the legacy of her family incomplete. Marisol placed a hand on her shoulder, the gesture both grounding and reassuring. "Know this," she continued, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Your choice will ripple through time, affecting all who come after you." With those words, the spirit vanished, leaving Esperanza alone beneath the starlit sky. The flowers continued to bloom, their petals unfurling in patterns that seemed to spell out messages only she could decipher. For the first time, she understood the true nature of her gift: not merely communication with spirits, but the ability to see beyond the veil of reality, to perceive the interconnectedness of all things. And though uncertainty still lingered, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever path she chose, It would lead her back to the heart of the house where destiny awaited. Guided by the cryptic words of Marisol and the growing conviction within herself, Esperanza approached the forbidden room with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. The door stood slightly ajar now, its iron bars removed as though to invite her entry. Pushing it open, she stepped inside, the air thickening around her like syrup, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something indefinably ancient. Shelves lined the walls, their surfaces cluttered with artifacts that seemed alive in their stillness, crystals glowing faintly, scrolls fluttering despite the absence of wind, jars containing substances whose color shifted under her gaze. At the center of the room rested the pedestal, its surface polished smooth by time, supporting the book she had glimpsed earlier. Its leather binding bore intricate carvings that pulsed softly as if breathing. Esperanza hesitated before touching it, aware of the weight of generations pressing upon her shoulders. When she finally opened the tome, its pages whispered secrets in a language both foreign and familiar, their meanings unfolding like petals greeting the dawn. Each word resonated deep within her, painting vivid images of her ancestors, performing rituals beneath skies streaked with constellations unknown to modern eyes. Among the entries, one passage caught her attention, a prophecy concerning a chosen daughter destined to restore balance between worlds. The text described trials she must face, sacrifices she must make, and knowledge she must acquire. Though written centuries ago, the words felt personal, as though they had been waiting for her all along. Esperanza read them aloud, her voice trembling yet steady, each syllable echoing through the chamber like a bell tolling across time. Outside, the jungle responded, its creatures stirring restlessly, sensing the shift in energies. As she delved deeper into the writings, other artifacts began to reveal their purposes. A mirror on the wall showed not her reflection but scenes from distant times, her grandmother tending to the sick, her great-grandmother mediating disputes among spirits, and herself standing amidst the crowd whose faces blurred into shadows. Another object, a bowl filled with sand that glowed faintly, revealed visions of places far beyond the confines of the Hausa city, shrouded in mist, a mountain crowned with snow, and a river winding through lands untouched by human hands. Each vision carried significance, hinting at connections between her family's legacy and the broader tapestry of existence. Esperanza spent hours poring over the contents of the room, her mind racing with revelations. She learned of pacts made with spirits, agreements forged to maintain harmony between realms. She discovered accounts of betrayals and triumphs, failures and redemptions, each story weaving into the larger narrative of her lineage. Among these tales, one name recurred repeatedly, El Sombrío, a shadowy figure said to embody the darker aspects of their powers. His presence loomed over the history of her family, a constant reminder of the risks inherent in wielding such gifts. By evening, exhaustion claimed her, yet sleep eluded her. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the relics of her ancestors, attempting to piece together the puzzle of her destiny. The whispers grew louder, overlapping in a symphony of voices calling her name. Some urged caution, warning of dangers ahead. Others encouraged boldness, reminding her of the strength coursing through her veins. Through it all, one thought remained clear. Whatever path she chose, it would require courage, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to truth. Her aunt found her there, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the crystals scattered about the room. Without speaking, the older woman joined her, adding her own insights to the discoveries Esperanza had made. Together, they speculated about the implications of the prophecy, the nature of El Sombrío, and the role Esperanza was meant to play. Their conversation flowed seamlessly, a blend of questions and answers, doubts and certainties, until the night grew late and the jungle outside fell silent. Before leaving the room, Esperanza paused to touch the book once more, its surface warm beneath her fingers. Closing it gently, she whispered a promise to honor the legacy entrusted to her. As she stepped back into the corridor, the door closed behind her with a soft click, sealing the room until the next phase of her journey demanded its reopening. The house itself seemed to exhale, its walls settling into a quietude that spoke of patience and readiness. And though uncertainty still lingered, Esperanza walked away, knowing she had taken the first step toward fulfilling her destiny. The following morning brought clarity, its light streaming through the windows with a warmth that dispelled lingering doubts. Esperanza rose early, her movements deliberate as she prepared for what lay ahead. In the garden, flowers bloomed in impossible hues, their petals shimmering like rainbows captured in form. Birds sang melodies unfamiliar yet harmonious, their songs blending with the rustling leaves to create a symphony of life. Within this serene setting, Esperanza felt the pull of her heritage stronger than ever, a force drawing her toward the inevitable confrontation with the shadows lurking just beyond perception. Her uncle appeared later, his expression grave but resolute. He carried a map, rolled tightly in his hand, its edges frayed with age. Unfolding it on the dining table, he pointed to markings that indicated locations significant to their family's history. "These places hold keys," he explained, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken truth. "To understand fully, you must visit them." Esperanza studied the map carefully, noting landmarks both familiar and mysterious, each one promising answers her, perhaps more questions. As the day wore on, preparations began for her journey. Supplies were gathered, instructions given, and blessings offered. Her aunt placed a small pouch around her neck, its contents blessed by generations past. "Carry this always," she said, her tone both tender and commanding. "It will guide you when the way seems lost." Esperanza accepted the gift with gratitude, feeling its weight against her chest, a tangible connection to those who came before her. By evening, the house buzzed with activity, yet beneath the busyness lay a current of anticipation. The jungle outside seemed to listen, its creatures pausing in their routines as though sensing the importance of the moment. Esperanza stood at the edge of the property, her bag slung over her shoulder, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Turning back for one last look, she saw her family gathered on the porch, their faces lit by lanterns swaying gently in the breeze. They waved farewell, their smiles bittersweet, knowing she embarked on a path from which there might be no return. With a deep breath, Esperanza stepped forward, her feet crunching softly on the gravel path. Behind her, the mansion loomed, its silhouette jagged against the fading light, its windows gleaming faintly like watchful eyes. Ahead stretched the unknown, a labyrinth of challenges and discoveries, waiting to shape her into the person she was meant to become. And though fear accompanied her, so too did determination, a fire burning brightly within her soul, fueling her steps toward destiny. The confrontation came not as a sudden eruption, but as an insidious seepage, like water finding its way through cracks in stone. Esperanza felt it first in the air, which grew heavier with each passing hour, pressing against her chest until even breathing became an effort. The jungle outside seemed to hold its breath, its usual symphony of sounds muted, replaced by an oppressive silence that whispered warnings of impending danger. Inside the house, shadows danced erratically across the walls, their movements no longer playful but sinister, twisting into shapes that resembled gnarled hands reaching out to snatch at her heels. Her aunt noticed the change immediately, her sharp eyes scanning the room as though searching for some invisible intruder. "It's him," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the pounding of Esperanza's heart. "El Sombrío has awakened." The name sent a shiver down Esperanza's spine, its syllables heavy with dread. She remembered the accounts from the Forbidden Room, how he represented the darker aspects of their powers, feeding on fear and doubt, thriving on chaos. Now, his presence loomed closer than ever, a palpable force that pressed against the boundaries of the house. The manifestations began subtly, objects falling without explanation, doors creaking open despite being firmly shut, whispers growing louder until they filled every corner of the estate. One night, Esperanza awoke to find her bedroom door ajar, a sliver of moonlight slicing through the darkness. Beyond it stood a figure cloaked in shadow, its form indistinct yet unmistakably malevolent. It moved slowly toward her, each step accompanied by a low guttural growl that resonated deep within her bones. Paralyzed with fear, she watched as it extended a hand, its fingers curling into claws tipped with blackened nails. Summoning every ounce of courage, Esperanza forced herself to speak. "Who are you?" Her voice trembled, but it was enough to halt the creature's advance. For a moment, the room fell silent, the only sound the rapid beating of her heart. Then the figure spoke, its voice a rasping echo that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I am what you deny," it said, its words dripping with malice. "Your fears, your doubts, they feed me." Realizing the truth of its statement, Esperanza steeled herself, drawing upon the strength she had discovered within the Forbidden Room. "Then I will starve you," she declared, her tone firmer now, though her hands still shook. The figure recoiled slightly, its form flickering like smoke caught in a breeze. Encouraged, she pushed further, recalling the teachings of her ancestors. She invoked their names, their sacrifices, their triumphs, weaving them into a protective shield around herself. The shadow hissed in anger, its shape contorting wildly as it fought against the power of her words. Over the following days, similar encounters occurred, each one more intense than the last. Esperanza learned to recognize the signs of El Sombrio's presence, the chill in the air, the metallic tang of fear on her tongue, and to counteract them with rituals passed down through generations. She burned herbs whose scents warded off negativity, chanted phrases imbued with ancient magic, and created symbols on the walls using ash and charcoal. Slowly but surely, she gained control over her emotions, transforming fear into resolve, doubt into certainty. Yet the final confrontation awaited her in the heart of the mansion, where the energies of both worlds converged. Guided by Marisol's spirit, she descended into the basement, a place untouched by time, its air thick with the scent of earth and decay. There, beneath a dome of crystal embedded in the ceiling, stood El Sombrio in all his terrifying glory, a towering figure composed entirely of shadow, his features shifting constantly between human and monstrous forms. Around him swirled a maelstrom of negative energy, feeding his power and amplifying his influence. "You cannot defeat me," he roared, his voice shaking the very foundations of the house. "You are part of me, just as I am part of you." Esperanza hesitated, his words striking a chord of truth within her. Indeed, she saw fragments of herself reflected in his essence, the doubts she harbored, the fears she struggled to overcome. But she also recognized something else, the strength she had cultivated, the love of her family, the legacy she carried forward. These were forces far greater than any darkness. With newfound clarity, she confronted him, her voice ringing out like a bell tolling across time. "If I am part of you, then you are part of me," she said, her words cutting through the storm of negativity surrounding them. "And if that is so, then I choose to banish you not because I fear you, but because I have embraced everything you represent." Raising her hands, she summoned the combined power of her ancestors, channeling it through her body and directing it outward in a surge of pure light. The crystal dome above glowed brighter, its radiance intensifying until it consumed the entire space. El Sombrio screamed, his form dissolving under the onslaught of light, his shadow scattering like dust in the wind. When the light faded, the basement stood empty, its air lighter, its atmosphere cleansed. Esperanza collapsed to her knees, exhausted but triumphant, her soul purged of the lingering remnants of doubt and fear. Above her, the mansion exhaled softly, its walls settling into a quietude that spoke of peace and renewal. Outside, the jungle erupted into song, its creatures rejoicing in the restoration of balance. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Esperanza climbed the stairs, her steps steady despite her weariness. She emerged into the garden where flowers bloomed in vibrant colors, their petals unfurling like pages of a new chapter. The air smelled fresh, tinged with the promise of beginnings. Behind her, the mansion stood tall, its silhouette framed by the rising sun, its windows gleaming like watchful eyes. And though uncertainty still lingered, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had faced her greatest challenge and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever destiny awaited her next. The aftermath of the confrontation brought a stillness that permeated every corner of the mansion, its weight neither oppressive nor light, but rather a profound equilibrium. Esperanza stood in the garden, her body weary, yet her spirit buoyed by an inner peace she had never known before. The flowers around her seemed to pulse with life, their color shifting subtly as if responding to the harmonious energies now restored. She reached out to touch one, its petals soft and warm beneath her fingertips, and for the first time she felt no fear, only connection. Her family gathered around her soon after, their faces etched with relief and pride. Her aunt embraced her tightly, whispering words of encouragement into her ear, while her uncle nodded approvingly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Together, they sat beneath the shade of an ancient tree, its branches arching protectively over them like a guardian's arms. They spoke of the future, their voices carrying hope and resolve, each sentence weaving another thread into the tapestry of renewal. Esperanza listened intently, her mind already turning toward the responsibilities that awaited her. The role of mediator between worlds was not one she had sought, but it was hers nonetheless, a legacy she would honor with all her strength. She envisioned herself tending to those who sought guidance, healing wounds both visible and invisible, bridging gaps between the seen and unseen. It was a daunting task, yes, but also a privilege, a chance to continue the work begun by her ancestors. In the days that followed, the house itself seemed to awaken anew, its walls breathing life into every room. Shadows danced playfully across the floors, no longer threatening but playful companions. The artifacts within the forbidden room glowed softly, their surfaces smooth and inviting, each one a testament to the knowledge passed down through generations. Esperanza spent hours there, learning from the journals and relics, piecing together the intricacies of her newfound abilities. She began practicing rituals in the garden, invoking the powers of nature to strengthen her connection to the spirits. Crystals hung from strings swayed gently in the breeze, their reflections casting patterns on the ground that shifted with the movements of the sun. Her voice rang out in chants whose melodies carried across the jungle, drawing creatures near to listen. Each ritual deepened her understanding, each success reinforcing her confidence. Yet even as she embraced her role, questions lingered, their answers hidden just beyond reach. Who were the other entities mentioned in the journals? What secrets remained buried within the depths of the mansion? And what new challenges might arise as the balance shifted once more? These thoughts did not trouble her. Instead, they fueled her curiosity, urging her to explore further, to uncover truths that would shape her journey. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of violet and indigo, Marisol appeared to her again, her form shimmering like water under moonlight. You have done well, the spirit said, her voice soft yet resonant. But your work is far from over. There are others who need your help. Lands where harmony has fractured. People whose lives hang in the balance. Esperanza nodded, accepting the responsibility without hesitation. She asked about the map her uncle had given her, its markings promising destinations rich with significance. Marisol smiled, her features dissolving momentarily into mist. Follow the path it shows you, she advised. Each place will reveal something essential, teaching you lessons that will prepare you for what lies ahead. With those words, she vanished, leaving Esperanza alone beneath the starlit sky. The map lay open in her lap, its symbols glowing faintly in the darkness, guiding her toward the next phase of her destiny. The following morning, preparations began in earnest. Supplies were packed carefully, each item chosen for its utility or symbolic importance. Her aunt gifted her a pendant carved from crystal, its surface inscribed with runes that pulsed softly when touched. It will guide you, her aunt explained, her tone both tender and firm. Esperanza accepted it gratefully, feeling its warmth against her chest, a constant reminder of her roots. As she prepared to leave, the mansion seemed to bid her farewell, its walls whispering words of encouragement, its floors vibrating with support. Flowers bloomed along her path, their petals forming patterns that spelled messages only she could read. Outside, the jungle stirred restlessly, its creatures sensing the departure of someone integral to their world. Birds sang melodies unfamiliar yet harmonious, their songs blending with the rustling leaves to create a symphony of life. Standing at the edge of the property, Esperanza turned back for one last look. The mansion loomed behind her, its silhouette jagged against the rising sun, its windows gleaming faintly like watchful eyes. She waved goodbye to her family, their faces lit by lanterns swaying gently in the breeze, their smiles bittersweet yet filled with pride. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped forward, her feet crunching softly on the gravel path, her heart pounding with anticipation. Ahead stretched the unknown, a labyrinth of challenges and discoveries waiting to shape her into the person she was meant to become. Though uncertainty still lingered, so too did determination, a fire burning brightly within her soul, fueling her steps toward destiny. The jungle closed in around her, its shadows shifting independently, its whispers growing louder, calling her name. She walked onward, ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that the legacy of her family would guide her every step of the way.